Welcome to the Strategic Marketer Podcast, where we talk about strategies, tactics, and practical steps to help you become a more strategic marketer. I'm your host, Joseph Lewin, and today's conversation is with Juan Arcila. Juan is an account executive at Wistia. Now, this conversation is interesting because Juan had actually reached out to me through email and got me to book a call with him to learn how Wistia could help my company with video hosting and driving more leads through our videos. Now, sometimes I have salespeople on marketing podcasts because in B2B, sales and marketing need to be aligned. And the better that we as marketers can understand how good salespeople operate and how we can support our sales team, the more we're going to be able to reach our KPIs and help our companies to grow. Now, Juan has a really interesting perspective on personalization. And coming from Wistia, they have great sales and marketing alignment. So he's going to share some about Wistia's approach to marketing and how Wistia has marketing and sales aligned. So without further ado, let's dive into the conversation. All right, Juan, what does Wistia do?
Yeah, so Wistia is a video hosting and content marketing platform. So we help B2B marketers host their videos on the web, track their video performance, and drive and growth revenue as a result.
Yeah, so part of the reason that we started interacting and that I responded to your email and our conversation got started was because I'm already fairly familiar with Wistia, and I've kind of engaged with Wistia's content before. So your company's done a great job at content marketing and engaging with me up front. And I love seeing brands that really nail the marketing side, but then also have a solid sales team that continues that messaging on.
Sure.
But in our pre-conversation, you had talked about Wistia's people-centric focus.
Yep.
And how that kind of helps you maintain, focus on building relationships with people. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about Wistia's people-focused approach.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Wistia is a very special place. I've been in the company for about a year now. And the reason Wistia was my number one target when I was out in the job market was because of their people-centric focus. And that's pretty apparent even by just going on their website. Like they always highlight the employees that work for them. They highlight their culture. So it was easy to see and peek behind the scenes and really understand what their values are, right? So from an HR perspective, of course, like they really take care of their people as far as fair compensation, incredible benefits, great career progression, but they really go out of the way to really understand who you are, what your goals are, and really make sure that you're set up in a journey where you can continue to grow with the company. So it's not a very transactional type of product, like even the Wistia app itself. And that can be extrapolated into how the founders run the company as well. So everything from the marketing collateral to the stories that we tell, it's all people focused, whether it's using Wistia employees and the faces behind Wistia to promote that, or making our customers really the heroes of Wistia. So that's what I meant by being people-centric and people-focused.
Yeah, and the reason that I feel like this is relevant, normally I don't start out by asking about your brand, the brand you work for and what you do, and, focusing on HR practices at companies. This is the HR podcast. But to me, this is really important because the way that the leadership in the company approaches managing their people internally has a huge effect on the approach that their sales team takes to approaching their customers. So if a company doesn't prioritize that people-centric focus internally, how can they expect that their sales team is going to be able to go out and build those deep relationships with customers? I feel like at a lot of companies, it ends up being very quota and revenue driven. And obviously we're in business. You need to make revenue, and a lot of sales jobs have quota, and it's not necessarily that quota in itself is bad. But if that's the primary focus within the company, and that level of pressure is being put on the salespeople without salespeople understanding the importance of building those relationships, and that those relationships build the brand, it's really easy to end up treating customers really poorly and looking at them more as a transaction versus a long-term relationship that you're building with someone.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It has to come from the top, and you got to lead by example. If you're in a workplace where you feel like you don't really belong, or that you're just like another number, on the spreadsheet, whether it's like for payroll or whatever, if you don't feel that connection and that trust with the brand, with the company, I mean, that's going to bleed through every interaction that you have with customers. You're going to treat them the exact same way. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like company culture is key, especially now, with the pandemic and everything going on. People are really taking a step back and reflecting on their careers. Like, am I where I need to be right now? Like we live in an incredible time where the workers and employees really have a lot of leverage now. And you see that reflected in the job numbers right now, in the economy. So I think a lot of companies have to reflect and reevaluate kind of the culture and what they want to present to the people that work for them. So yeah, couldn't agree more there.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to understand how all of those different pieces affect your messaging and the way that you come across. So if you want to build a marketing campaign that's focused on building relationships with people long term, and you want to build a sales process that comes out of that and builds that relationship, it's important that goes all the way
Yeah,
through. So Wistia kind of has a unique approach to marketing, which is part of the reason that I found Wistia myself,
yeah.
a long time ago, and have spent a lot of time researching what you guys do and looking at your product. So tell me a little bit about Wistia's approach to marketing.
Yeah, so I see Wistia more as a media company first and like a SaaS company second. And I think that's a
Mm,
trend that a lot of companies are adopting. So like our ethos is, instead of advertising on a podcast, we want to become the podcast. So
mm,
we have a ton of video series, a lot of podcasts that are engaging, that are captivating, and that are also very educational. So our goal is really to build a relationship even before somebody becomes a customer. We want to make sure that they understand industry best practices, that they come to us whether or not they're in the market for a video hosting solution. And when they are in market, of course, we want them to think of us. But at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that we're sharing the culture that we've built through Wistia, and we're building those relationships. So relationships first, transaction second. So that's the concept of brand affinity that Wistia is trying to promote.
yeah, and then um, yeah, I love that. It's kind of like instead of advertising on the media, be the media. I think you
Yeah,
might have said that
yeah,
phrase in our first conversation,
yeah,
and I absolutely love that idea because it's there's so many things you can't count on in marketing. So, you focus on SEO and then Google changes their algorithm one day and you
yeah,
lose 30% of your traffic overnight and it takes you a year or two or three to rebuild back to where you were before.
yeah,
Or, you're get organic reach on social media and, you're seeing benefit from organic reach and then suddenly the algorithm changes and overnight you're losing 30, 40, 50% of your organic traffic overnight.
yeah,
And the same can be true for advertising. Like you have an advertising campaign that's working great, and then there's some new regulation or some change in the way that the advertising works, and or they just decide to start charging more, and that can totally derail your advertising campaign. Whereas if you are the go-to platform for your audience, and they go to you for all of their information, all of their learning, and even for entertainment,
100%. Yeah,
then you're the one that people are coming to asking to advertise on your shows. I
exactly.
mean,
Yeah,
then you can even like have new streams of revenue outside of your business altogether, if you wanted to go that route. Or on the other side, you're just building these deep relationships and deep rapport with your customers, and that goes a really long way.
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and to your point, like we can't just rely on traditional marketing now. Like there's so much changing, especially now in the data privacy revolution. Like you mentioned, we're not 100% sure we can rely on Facebook and Google and SEO, right? So we got to find more creative ways to kind of build that rapport with our audience and make sure that we don't put all of our eggs in one basket, right? So it's more of a long-term strategy, and I feel that's why a lot of marketers maybe a little bit apprehensive about really doubling down on that route because you don't get immediate KPIs metrics, right? It's like conversion
Right.
rates are not right in front of you. It's really more of a longer term strategy. But I think the people that really double, quadruple down on that are ultimately going to be the winners in the end. So I think brand affinity is not the future; it really is the present.
Yeah, and I think back in the day, there was a lot of focus on brand, and that kind of came from the consumer products world.
Yeah,
So I live in Cincinnati, so P&G is based out of here.
yeah,
So there's a lot of advertising agencies that are focused on, specifically working with and P&G is all about brand and building a brand. And I have several friends that work there, and they talk about brand all the time. And I think there was kind of a pushback to that a while ago, where people started to say, well, how do we actually connect that to revenue at
yeah.
all? And especially for smaller companies, I think that's a really relevant question. And then, if you talk to people at P&G, they're pretty siloed. So you might talk to somebody who's a designer and they're all about brand, but it's really focused on your color scheme or the look and feel of your website, your usability, and those things are good. They're all important, but that's not really what brand is. Your brand
Mm,
is your reputation in the market
yeah.
and the trust that people have for you. So I think people kind of got a little bit disillusioned with branding because it just became synonymous with kind of the look and feel of your company, but not that underlying trust that you've built in the market. And so then a lot of marketers have moved more to, especially in the B2B space, to things that have attribution, things that you can measure really clearly, that can, you can say, I did this campaign and I got a conversion from it. And that stuff is great. I mean, it's a huge part of marketing. It's really important. But on the flip side, I think if you reduce marketing purely to those attribution channels, things that you can clearly say, I ran this campaign and I got X number of leads from it, you can really be missing out on what you're talking about, that long-term building trust with the market. And that takes time. It takes years. I mean, you don't build a relationship with somebody overnight. And if you do build a relationship with somebody overnight, there's a lot of risks involved with like throwing yourself fully into a relationship with somebody that you met last night. There's a reason that that like if you have a sibling or or a friend that comes back and they're like, "Hey, I met this girl last night at a bar and she's the one and we're going to go get married and elope tomorrow. We're going to Vegas." That throws up a lot of red flags, right? And for good reason, because it takes
Yeah,
a long time to build that trust and relationship.
yeah.
So yeah, I love what Wistia has been doing on that and focusing on building that trust first.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Trust is everything. Yeah, and to your point, like if we look at the traditional marketing model, top of funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel, like there should be different metrics for each stage of that journey, right? So if you're doing like a top of funnel campaign, maybe the metric isn't amount of leads or amount of conversions. Maybe it really is just impressions or likes or I guess like vanity metrics because right now you're just trying to get eyes on the brand, right? And there are different ways to go about that. There are billboards. Coca-Cola. You just see the red can and the polar bear, and it's them. So I guess that's an
Right.
impression. But with Wistia, like our main focus is not really about just having those vanity metrics, but I guess really truly building that relationship, and that's really hard to measure. But we know that if we're providing captivating, educational, and entertaining content, that those metrics will eventually pan out on their own, right? So it may not be like an immediate result where we're meeting like, hey, this show immediately produced X amount of leads, but that's something that we can track in our journey and in the relationship that we're building with our prospects. Because we see it all the time. When I speak to people, they know about Wistia because of something that they saw on the website. Like, hey, I was really
Right.
watching this series and I really appreciate what you guys are doing. And I learned a ton from it, or I downloaded this PDF or ebook, whatever it may be, even just traditional content. But we're really seeing the best, I guess, results from creating binge-worthy episodic content. So again, going back to what we said,
Mm.
become the podcast, become the show. That's really the trend that we're seeing now in the marketplace.
This week's episode of The Strategic Marketer is brought to you by the Brand Compass course. If you're looking to take your marketing services side hustle to the next level, the Brand Compass course is for you. In the course, you're going to learn how to identify your ideal customers, and narrow down to serve a niche market. Then you're going to learn how to productize your offering so that it's easier for customers to understand exactly what you do for them. And then you're going to put all of this information into a one-page messaging guide. That way you can use your customer's language to speak exactly to their pain points and problems every single time. Check out the show notes for a link to the course. In a second, we're going to talk about sales and marketing alignment and how you guys do that at Wistia. But just to kind of drive home the value of what you're talking about, you're in sales.
Yeah.
And I responded to your email
Sure.
because I had trust already with Wistia. And, we kind of talked about this a little bit before the episode about how people come up with all of these gimmicks to try to get emails open and email responses. But if somebody doesn't already know either your name from your personal branding efforts, or your domain name from your company's branding efforts and, building trust in the market, they're so much less likely to open your email. And if they do open it, they're so much less likely to respond. So I think you're honestly better off having better name recognition and a subpar email than a great email and no brand recognition at all, because you already have that level of trust that you've built in the market over time. And I think Wistia, I know that Wistia has great sales and marketing alignment because I've been researching Wistia for a long time and already knew about Wistia from marketing. And then I went to a webinar about podcasting. And then I think it actually was a couple of weeks later, I got an email from you.
Yep.
And then by the time there were all of those steps, I did actually look at your domain name and saw Wistia. And then you had done an amazing job at personalizing that email specifically to me. So it was a combination of kind of all of the different pieces together: the personalization, the good subject line, an email that was written, personalized to me, but also all of the branding effort that had been done before and that consistent messaging from marketing to sales. So having prefaced with you killing it in that area and Wistia killing it in that area, what does the sales team look like at Wistia, and how do marketing and sales align at Wistia?
Yeah, so I guess we have a traditional sales model for SaaS. We have a team of SDRs. We have about 12 folks on that side, and then we have an AE group as well. So we're split up into different segments on the AE side. So I'm on the emerging markets. So I'm responsible for companies under 50 employees. And then we have an SMB segment that predominantly handles companies between 50 and 200 employees, right? So that's how we're segmented in Wistia. And then as far as the alignment that you were just talking about, I think really it kind of is like a 50-50 type of ratio, right? Like marketing does 50% of the work. And they really get that brand recognition and that name known in the marketplace. But then it's up to us to continue that relationship, and we can either make or break that relationship. So to your point, it definitely helps that somebody recognizes your name, and they immediately have that kind of spark go off in their heads, hey, I recognize this brand. I'm gonna open this email because I know who they are. But then it's up to you to continue that same level of, I guess, enjoyment that they've had with your brand, that same level of education that they're familiar with, and continue that in the email as well. So it's very easy to get lazy because you think your brand is recognized because they downloaded something, because they're a hand raiser. You can immediately go into the call to action and be like, hey, you want to book a meeting. But I think you should continue that same experience that they've had into the messaging itself. So I know that if somebody downloaded an ebook, they're interested, but I want to get into their head, where are they right now in that journey? Do they even need a call right now? Maybe they're just looking for even more information. And that's where I can really find out about where they are in that journey, what problems do they have, and meet them where they're at. And sometimes if it really is a hand raiser and they're looking for a demo, then absolutely, that is the immediate next step. But I think it's up to us as sales folks to not get trigger happy, not be tempted to automatically go for that meeting, but again, just to continue that relationship depending on where that person is.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And, to go back to the email you sent me, it was a combination of both of those things, the trust with Wistia as a brand, but then also you did an amazing job at personalizing that email to me. And I think something that gets to be difficult in companies where you get a lot of inbound leads
Yep.
is that sometimes the sales team relies too much on kind of templated messages,
Yep.
or has marketing create some generic campaign emails to send out. And
Yeah.
um, I've actually written some of those emails before, and I think there is value to email automation following up after some kind of content download if it's hyper focused on what that download was. So it's
Yeah.
not just general brand information, but if it's about um, podcasting and how to start a podcast, then if I get emails that keep going on that theme and add more value and entertain, I don't have a problem with that. But if you have an actual salesperson reach out and then they're just going to kind of be lazy and use that same method, it's like, well, I might as well not have a salesperson doing that then. Like I can do that through automation. So,
Yep.
if I don't want it to be personalized, if I don't want somebody to do that research, then I'll just automate it. And there's great copywriters out there who can write a better, a better conversion focused email than your typical salesperson could anyway. But where the salesperson really comes in my view, is the value that you bring in looking into that person's individual circumstances. So as a marketer, I have to look out at the market and say, what are the general pain points and problems that our audience is facing? And, what are those? I mean, they're specific to the audience, but like, what are the pain points and problems that go across the board for everybody in our audience? And then
Mm,
create campaigns that touch on the overall pain points for this audience segment and, what our product solves. What a salesperson can do is that they can then go in and figure out what are the ultra specific pain points for that customer, and work through that process.
yeah.
So yeah, that kind of leads us into, is doing research important for sales outreach?
100%. Absolutely. I think it should be mandatory before you even click send on any of your emails. Like, to your point, like if you wanted to just send out generic emails, you don't need a sales team for it. You can just use marketing automation and do that, but that's not very effective. And I guess like when it comes to doing research, the reason that I spend so much time doing it is because if I'm going to be ultimately asking for 15 minutes of somebody's time, like I should at least give them 5 minutes of my time by giving them the courtesy of researching their LinkedIn or their company, or really understanding what their current situation is. And there's different tiers to research and personalizing an email. A lot of people feel that just by going on somebody's LinkedIn and commenting on the college that they went to, hey, I noticed you went to Duke University, and then automatically pivoting into their pitch, they think that's
Right.
personalization. And it's not. I think personalization should be coupled with relevance. So I was talking to you before about a sales conference that I went to, and actually, when I started off as an SDR, I hired a coach, a sales trainer to
Mm.
train me on messaging, because I knew that the status quo was not working. Sending out 200 emails per day and hoping that somebody converts on that. That's not the skill set that I wanted to build, right? So I
Mm.
really wanted to build the skill set of prospecting, and actually building those relationships with clients, and ultimately continue those relationships. So I think personalization is huge. Again, you have to make sure that you're not going overboard, and then you're not spending the majority of your day researching. But there's definitely a fine line between, okay, I'm going to spend X amount of time researching and then X amount of time actually sending out those emails and sending out or doing those cold calls as well. So it's definitely a balance. And that's what separates a good AE, a good SDR from like the great
Right.
ones. They know exactly how to live within that range.
Yeah, and I mean, probably getting some methodology down for doing that research. So yeah, I'd like to talk about your research process
Sure.
a little bit more.
Okay.
But does doing that kind of research only apply to when you're doing outbound, or do you do research when you get an inbound lead as well?
I do both. Absolutely. Outbound for sure. Inbound, it's still important to do research. I guess it goes back to what we were saying before. It's easy to get stuck in the trap of thinking that because if it's an inbound lead, they automatically want to buy. So
Right.
I'm sure like a lot of sailors, and this is something that I've struggled with in the past. Like I get like happy ears, like I'm like, oh, ka-ching, like it's an inbound lead, like they want to buy, right? So I immediately try to go in for booking the meeting. But no, even for inbound, If it's like somebody that's requesting a demo or somebody that's, signed up for a free account in Wistia, like I still take the time to go into their LinkedIn and find like a personalized premise. And then I use that in
Mm,
my outreach as well. So like for your example, you were kind of like an inbound lead because you signed up for a podcast. But I didn't
right.
immediately go in and say, hey, notice you signed up for a podcast. Do you want to jump on a quick 15-minute chat? Like I still took the time to go into your LinkedIn, find out who you are, and then use that in my messaging as well. So yeah, both for inbound and outbound.
Yeah, and it worked.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
ended up having a conversation and
Yeah,
leading to the podcast and, working through that. Um, so can you walk me through what your research process looks like? And if you want to use the email that you sent to me
sure.
and, and that example, you're free to do that, or, just kind of generalized is fine too.
Yeah, happy to go into the tactics behind it. So I I every time I'm doing prospecting and I'm doing research, I try to find at least three personalized premises that I can use to fuel like my entire cadence and sequence, right? So I might find one personalized premise on LinkedIn, and then I'm going to use that in the first touch email. Then the second personalized premise, I may use that in my third or fourth touch. And then finally, the third personalized email, I may use that at the end of an email, right? So every email I
Mm,
want it to be unique. I want it to be different. So going back to the example from my email to you, I went into your LinkedIn first. I looked at your about profile, um, and I got to the very end, and it literally straight up, you said, "Hey, if you want to cold pitch me, if you want to reach out to me, use this magic word, use chickens." So that was like my subject line. It was simply, "Hey, did somebody say chickens?" And I added that chicken emoji. And then in the actual meat of the email, I still continue personalizing. Like I didn't stop there. Just like, "Hey, you gave me this magic passcode. I
right.
found it. Do you want to chat?" I still found a personalized premise and then used that in my message. So first thing first, I say like, first off, thank you for enrolling in our podcast, like a pro webinar, which you did. So again, that kind of shows you who we are from the get go. It's like, oh yeah, that's right, I did register for a podcast. But then I completely make it about you afterwards, and I say, but most importantly, I came across your LinkedIn profile. And besides getting the magic password that hopefully got you to open this email, one thing that stood out to me was over the last few years, videos that I have created for small businesses have gotten over 1 million views. They have been used to launch products, drive sales, teach customers how to use products, and for online courses. So that right there shows that I did research. Like I took the
Yeah.
time to go into your LinkedIn page, I picked out something personalized and I put it in the messaging, but I tied that into my value prop as well. So
Yeah.
then,
And you didn't just say like, yeah, I saw that you're a marketing manager at Cadina's Part Solutions, because that's pretty easy for people to scrape that information. So, I mean, to me,
exactly.
when I get an email like that, especially if you're okay, hint, if you're reaching out to marketers, we understand how marketing email works, and that you can just pull tokens in. And so I'm not impressed
Yeah.
if you pull my name and my title in there. That's not doing research.
Yeah.
That's being lazy, and it honestly is almost worse than not
Yeah, yeah, for
personalizing at
sure.
all. So it wasn't that, you actually went in, did research, read about specific things that I was focused on that relate to what you offer.
Absolutely. And that was the next line in the email. That was the value prop. I was like, hey, how are you currently using, your company's video content to increase lead generation and drive more sales as a result? And that ties in specifically to the premise that I referenced because it says that over the years you've used videos to drive sales, etc., for different companies. So I'm like, how are you currently using, Cardenas Parts video content to increase lead generation and drive more sales for your company right now? So that was the question that I did, right? That I gave you. And then my CTA, I am actually asking for time. So that I guess goes counter to a lot of best practices that are going on LinkedIn that you should never ask for time in your first touch email. But I think it depends. Like if you take the time to really do research and really get to know your prospect, I think it's okay to ask for time. So my CTA was if you give me a shot tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern to unpack how other marketing managers leverage the Wistia platform to help them drive and track ROI in their video strategy, I promise I won't hammer you with follow up emails if I strike out. So I'm putting myself on the line. I'm like, hey, if you give me a shot, it can go either both ways. There can be a connection and it can hit home, or otherwise, we can just stop talking, right? So I'm literally just giving you the option, giving you the power to do that. But then I end with kind of like a poll technique. So I'm like, either way, keep up the great video and podcast content, and hope you and your family are staying safe and healthy in Ohio. So that right there shows that I still did more research. I found out where you left, and I'm just saying, like, either way, doesn't matter how you want to proceed. I hope that everything goes well. So that's kind of like the main structure of the emails that I reached out. Like the first line has to do with how they know about Wistia, whether they download a PDF, signed up for a webinar, whatever it may be. And the rest of the email, I make it about the prospect.
Strategic Marketer is brought to you in part by Thrive Themes. Thrive Themes is a killer visual WordPress editor. They've also recently launched editable themes so that you can edit every element of your WordPress theme. You can create amazing landing pages that are beautiful and conversion focused. They've built all of their products around helping you convert more leads into customers. You can find out more about Thrive Themes by clicking the link in the show notes. Yeah, I love that. And just to kind of pull this back around, I mean, it worked, and you did a great job. And we're not really going to go too far into your actual like demo and the conversation we had, but just I want to say one note on it. It wasn't a demo, really. You weren't showing me a slide presentation and trying to go through all that. You asked me questions, and you listened, and you used some different ways to get me to talk more. And the more that I talk, the more information you have. And then when you do share information at the end, it's highly relevant to me. And again, that's kind of the sales. What makes salespeople valuable is when you take the time to understand my specific circumstances, and you're not so quick to jump into, here's our features, our benefits, and all of this stuff. I can read all that online.
Yeah.
I don't need you to tell me that. I need you to connect those features and benefits to my specific problem. And you did an excellent job at that, but that had to be a whole nother podcast. So I want to just tie this back in to the marketing side. So for one, a lot of marketing people actually do have to do outreach. So if you have a podcast, you got to do outreach and get people onto your podcast. Or if you do SEO, you really need to get backlinks. So you might need to be doing outreach to get people to give you backlinks.
Yeah.
Or maybe you need to find a subject matter expert that you can interview to write better content, and you have to reach out to them. And so these same things apply, even if it's not going for the sale. You're still trying to sell somebody on opening your email and responding and giving you their time. And sometimes they're not really getting that much value out of it at all, besides, having maybe a quote attributed to them or something. So, in some ways you can even be asking for more than like, hey, I actually have a product that would help you. Instead, it's like, hey, I'd like to put your quote in this article or something. It's so it's important for for marketing people to understand this also. And the process. And then the other side that connects it to marketing is at a lot of B2B companies, especially small ones, the marketing team a lot of times has the opportunity to help salespeople with this process. And typically, your marketing team is going to be better at writing emails, understanding messaging, understanding like how to tie pain points and problems to the value proposition of your solution. And so having your marketing team understand those things and understand how the sales team is doing cold outreach, there's an opportunity to really add value to your sales team by helping them craft more personalized emails and kind of tie all of those pieces together. Because from a marketing perspective, I have to do that on a sales page or on a landing page or in, emails that, more of the generalized emails. We're doing that, finding the pain points and problems, figuring out how to tie the value proposition to the pain point and problem, and how that helps the customer achieve something that they need to do their job better. And so then on the sales email side, we're going to be able to come in and a lot of times help with that. So that's where understanding how that process works and being able to kind of guide your sales team to having those more personalized emails is going to make whatever you're doing on the marketing side go way further. Because if you're bringing in, 10 leads, and right now one of those leads converts into a sale, but by helping your sales team, do a better job, they're converting, they convert 2 or 3. That's a huge difference in the value that your 10 leads has compared to what it did before.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So just to cap off, maybe you could speak to 2 things. What are some practical steps that salespeople can take to connect with prospects more? I know you kind of went into it a little bit. And then on the flip side, what are some steps that marketers can take to add value to their sales team if they maybe don't have the same alignment right now that you have at Wistia?
Yeah, so on the sales side, I think the research method that we just talked about, I think that's key, right? Going in, it doesn't necessarily have to be LinkedIn. It can be like go on the website and see if the person you're trying to reach out to actually was the author for a blog post, or they have like a video on their site. It can be anything that they created themselves, right? Because
Mm.
we react really well to the things that we create, and when somebody acknowledges us or gives us props for it. So I always try to just find stuff that they author themselves, right? It could be in the about me page on LinkedIn, it could be their job description, but like the best thing would be like an article that they wrote or a blog post, or if you find them on a podcast episode and you reference something that they said on that episode directly in your messaging, like that goes a long way. So that's something practical that salespeople can do. Take that extra step, go in LinkedIn, podcast, or website, and find something that's relevant. And it takes time. It really does. And that's why a lot of
Yeah.
people don't do it. They rather just send out mass emails. But if you want to really stand out from the noise, you have to spend a few minutes going in and getting to know your prospect. Otherwise, how are you going to expect them to give you 15 minutes of their time? So from the marketing
Yeah, that's
perspective, I
excellent.
think something that marketers can do and then this is something that Wistia already does as well. So providing their sales team with content that's going to help move the needle in that customer journey, right?
Mm.
So like you downloaded our podcast, um, or you actually register for the podcast. So we have a ton of content relating to why somebody would download a podcast. Like, well, what are they trying to do with it? Are they trying to build brand? Are they trying to develop their own kind of personal side hustle? Whatever it may be. So I was prepared for that in our conversation. Like, depending on how it went, if you were just interested in Wistia for your own podcasting efforts, well, I have a lot of resources that I can reference in our conversation that could help you solve those
Mm.
problems. Um, but even more, getting more granular on that is if marketing actually helps you understand what are the key metrics that your prospects are measured on. So what are they
Mm.
gold on in their company? And like for us, we're prospecting to B2B marketers, and they care about leads. They care about marketing qualified leads. That's a huge
Yeah,
metric. So I know that whenever I'm
absolutely.
sending an email, I'm tying it to that specific problem. It's like they want to generate leads ultimately. Yeah, like brand impressions, etc. But if that's the metric, if that's the problem that they're experiencing right now, they're going to be more enticed to actually respond to that level of messaging. So yeah,
Yeah, I think that's really key because a lot of times people are tying it to a pain point or problem that is important to the company that's selling the product, and it's the kind of most visible thing. So maybe the pain point is converting leads through videos,
yeah,
and that does solve a problem. Yeah, I need to convert leads better, and I'm creating video. But the real problem is I have all this pressure from my boss to be increasing MQLs, the marketing qualified leads, and
yeah,
I'm kind of like on the verge of getting in trouble because our leads are down this month, and we're down, we're not going to meet our quota because you're not bringing enough leads. Like that's way more painful. And then on the flip side of that, it's also, well, if I can actually bring in those leads, it helps me win at my job. And if I double or triple the amount of leads, maybe I'll get a promotion, or I'll
exactly.
get a raise or whatever. So if
Yeah,
you're able to tie it to those like second or third kind of level pain points and desires, and how what you're doing helps them make a transformation, not just to like solve a base level problem, like, oh, you need to convert leads on your website. It's like, okay,
yeah,
sure, but it's more, no, you need marketing qualified leads so that you can get a promotion, or whatever that underlying thing is. And maybe not necessarily putting on the nose that much, but at least if you understand that, you're able to write much more compelling email messaging. So
absolutely.
yeah, this has been great. What are some ways that people can get connected with you specifically, and then learn more about what you guys do?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so just look me up, Juan Arcila. My last name is Arcila, and that's the best way to connect is through LinkedIn. Happy to share my best practices. I'm still a student, like I'm always learning more. So if you have best practices that has been working for you, I'd love to connect and share that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. And I'll definitely put a link in the show notes to your profile too, so people can easily connect with you.
Thank you.
So yeah, well, thank you so much for taking time to be on the podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation, and keep up the good work.
Likewise. Thank you, Joseph. Talk soon.
Yep. Thank you for listening to this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to The Strategic Marketer wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could do me a personal favor and hit 5 stars on the rating, you don't have to leave a full review, just hit 5 stars. It would really help me out. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Strategic Marketer.